My name is Arthur. I am 34 years old, born in Texas, and a specialist in logistics and supply chain management. I had been working at the same company for 3 years, silently navigating the system every day. I never showed off, never posted success stories on social media, and never sucked up to the bosses. But all my projects either saved the budget or improved efficiency. I was the man working behind the scenes. The spotlight wasn't on me, but on the results. The company's management style was strange. There was a constant turnover of managers. One would arrive, and 2 months later, they'd leave. Eventually, our 7th manager arrived. From the moment I heard her name, I wasn't impressed. She was young, flashy, and had an Ivy League degree, but she had zero experience. Despite this, the company placed its hopes on her. Meanwhile, I focused on my work. She had her own domain, I had mine. We were like two soldiers fighting on separate fronts. At first, we didn't clash. She didn't interfere with me, and I didn't interfere with her. But about a year later, things started to change. The arrogance in her eyes grew. The undertones of her words shifted. It was as if success was her birthright, and the rest of us were just struggling in her shadow. I began to notice that my achievements were standing out too much. By June 1st, I had 2 major projects worth $5 million ready for delivery. Meanwhile, her projects would only contribute about $2 million. The gap was too big for her, and the only way to close it was to stop me. One day, she ordered me to submit weekly reports, asking questions like, "What are you doing? Where are you at? What's left?" But I was already reporting to the regional project manager bi-weekly. She wasn't even involved in my field. However, she was my boss, and she wanted to flex her authority to the fullest. So I played my game. I sent her complex Excel files, unfiltered, without pivot tables, no formulas, just raw data. Because I knew one thing: her knowledge of Excel was superficial. I still smile when I remember the day I had to teach her how to use Ctrl+F. If she had asked, I would have explained. But she didn't, because admitting she didn't understand was not an option for her. I removed my data backups from the company server, disconnected my SkyDrive, and backed up all my files onto a portable hard drive that I carried with me every day. When leaving work, I left no trace on the company computers. Maybe someone else could have completed my projects, but they wouldn't have known the correct sequence of actions, who to talk to, or which details were critical. The tone and timing of every step were in my hands alone. As June approached, her pressure increased. She constantly emailed me, called meetings, and played mind games. But I stayed silent. I didn't react, because everything has an end, and hers was coming. And then, that morning, I decided I had enough. I walked into the office, sat at my desk, and grabbed a coffee. When she gave me a sharp glare, I looked her in the eyes and smiled. In my mind, I said, "You want a war? You got one." But outwardly, I only uttered one sentence: "Fuck off." I packed my desk, threw my hard drive into my bag, quietly closed the door behind me, and walked away. I could no longer stay in that company. She went straight to HR. Technically, I was fired, but that's only the version of the story that some might want to tell. Because at that moment, I was no longer following the game's rules. I was writing the ending. When I walked out of the office, there was no anger inside me, no regret, just silence. In that silence lay years of exhaustion, the weight of being undervalued, and the sharpness of patience. I didn't tell anyone, but as I stepped through that door, I already knew how things would end for that woman. And my plan didn't involve shouting or rebelling. It was about staying silent, just as I always had. When I got home, everything was already prepared. The data, the documents, the analyses, they were all in my hands. But more importantly, that woman had built the walls of her own failure with her own hands. All I had to do was wait, because I knew one thing: arrogance is the greatest ignorance. And in that, she was exceptionally talented. Her first move was exactly what I had predicted. She had tried to analyze my files, but didn't understand them. She called my assistant asking, "What was Arthur doing? How was he doing it?" She pressured and threatened my assistant. But that wasn't enough. She sent my projects to 3 different departments. "One of you must figure out what he was doing," she said. But these projects weren't ready-made meals. They were systems, comprehensive processes that I had learned, tested, and optimized over years. The formulas were missing, the data was unstructured, the timeline was broken, and the logic was disconnected. What they had in their hands was nothing more than a tangled web of knots. Of course, a few former colleagues reached out during this time. Well-meaning, they asked, "Can you help?" My answer was the same to all of them. I am no longer affiliated with the company. I cannot provide information about these projects. My conscience, it was at peace. Because for years, no one had looked out for me. They never gave me the promotions I deserved. Every new manager came in and built their own system. I had only ever done my job. But that woman, she tried to belittle my work. To cover up her incompetence, she chose to discard me. Meanwhile, rumors started circulating within the company. Why did Arthur's projects come to a halt? Why is the manager so panicked? What happened to the $5 million in projected revenue? Questions were being asked. Because my files weren't just data, they were security, and that security was now gone. I remained silent through it all, but only outwardly. Internally, I was analyzing, planning where the process was headed. This wasn't revenge. It was a reminder. Don't forget who I am, I thought to myself. Because sometimes the greatest lesson isn't destroying someone. It's making them witness their own incompetence. By May 16th, things were falling apart. The manager had prepared for her project presentation, but the graphs were incomplete. She couldn't answer the questions. I could imagine her sweating in front of the board. With every "where is this detail" question, I could feel the icy panic settling inside her. Because every step had meaning only when I took it. She was merely looking from the outside, shuffling the puzzle pieces without even knowing what the picture was supposed to be. And me? I was sitting by the seaside, sipping my coffee, waiting for the day to pass. Because sometimes revenge isn't about screaming. Sometimes revenge is simply letting absence be felt. And that absence grows and grows until it silently collapses upon itself. That was precisely my plan. I don't know what people were saying about me in the office. I didn't care. Because for me, the battle had already ended. The real war was inside her now. Every day she panicked a little more, losing control. And I remained silent as always. This silence was born from years of patience. And more than anything, it was this silence that unsettled her. During those days, a few former colleagues messaged me. "Nothing is working with this data. Is there any chance you'd come back?" they asked. I politely thanked them, but returning was impossible. Because now, it wasn't me who had lost. It was them. In a system that ignored me for years, refused to acknowledge my work, and kept me from the promotions I deserved, I couldn't be the one to save it again. Everyone would know their place, especially her. Only 10 days remained until the final project deadline, June 1st. The company's leadership started asking, "What's going on?" Of course, she tried to come up with excuses. Arthur delivered incomplete data. The team didn't provide enough support. Some systems were faulty, but everyone knew the truth. Those systems had been running flawlessly for a year. Every month, detailed reports had been sent to the board. Every report bore my mark, and now everything had come to a stop, because all they had left were numbers, but no mind to bring those numbers to life. She made one last move. She divided the project among 3 different assistant managers. "You'll finish it," she told them. But they couldn't, because this wasn't just desk work. It required someone who knew the field, the system, the people, the behaviors. I had designed every piece to match the pulse of that operation. And now, someone had pulled the plug, and the system had died. They were still playing with the wires. Meanwhile, I had already begun planning my own consulting firm. I was analyzing the network of connections I had built over my years in that company. Which firms could I collaborate with? Who could I work with? Because now I was free. And most importantly, I was going to use my mind for my own future. Her final attempt was to blame me. She sent reports to HR, telling the executives Arthur deliberately sabotaged the project. But there was no evidence. I had delivered everything on time, in the correct format. The rest was her responsibility, and the leadership realized it. A $5 million project had dropped to 0 in just 25 days. This was the greatest failure she had ever faced. And finally, on the morning of June 6th, an old friend messaged me. "Did you hear? She's gone." The manager had resigned. Her excuse? Family reasons. Of course, because admitting the real reason would be far too painful. I smiled as I read that message. In this story, I never shouted, never fought. I simply stood my ground. And most importantly, I turned my silence into my most powerful weapon. Months had passed. By then, it felt like I had no connection, thought, or feeling left toward my old company. But people don't erase the past completely. They simply organize it neatly on shelves. That's exactly what I did. My new office was outside the city, simple yet freeing. My consulting firm was now officially up and running. And the best part? My first client, as you might have guessed, was one of my old company's biggest rivals. Coincidence? No. In this industry, if you do good work finds you. The bad ones, however, get pushed out of the system. One day, while scrolling through LinkedIn, I came across her profile. The profile picture was gone, and the headline read, "Inactive." That woman, the one who once barked orders at me, who couldn't tolerate my knowledge, who ruined major projects with petty calculations, was now gone from the industry. No company would easily hire someone who had sunk a $5 million project and left in a hurry. She had fallen into the pit she dug herself. And the best part? I simply watched. Revenge isn't always taken with a scream or a slap. Sometimes, all it takes is calmly walking forward. And that walk becomes even sweeter with the echoes of those who fell behind. Every moment she humiliated me, every pointless meeting, every arrogant glance had now turned into a silent thank you. Because all of it had shaped me into the man I am today. At a conference, I ran into an old colleague. "Arthur, did you really plan all of this back then?" he asked. I smiled. "No," I said. "I simply did what needed to be done. And the rest happened the way it was meant to. Some things aren't planned. You simply make the right decision at the right moment. That's all I did. Protected myself. But I did it so masterfully that, in the end, an entire system collapsed on its own. One day, while sipping coffee in my office, my phone buzzed with a notification. My old company had filled out a request form for consulting services. I opened the email. The signature at the bottom was from HR. They wanted to revive the project, to rebuild the system, and they wanted me to do it. I didn't respond. I deleted the email. Because revenge isn't just about destruction. Sometimes, ignoring is the greatest punishment. They only realized my worth after they lost me. And by then, I was no longer just an employee in their shadow. I was a leader carving my own path. They say revenge is best served cold. No. I took my revenge in a quiet office, in the warmth of the afternoon sun streaming through the window, with a cup of coffee in hand. And that coffee was the sweetest thing I had ever tasted.